Since I
Yes. Yep. Okay. That's the only one.
Forgive them and be there on the day of judgment defending them. And I said, and I like it because that means he'll be there on the day defending me.
He did say that. That's actually a true statement.
It's so nice of you to say, David. Is this on?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, it is 6 o'clock, and I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I think that the process that we have tonight is an important one, and I just want to let you know just some of the guidelines for this evening. We have very passionate people in the room, to say the least, about... I hear your laugh and recognize it. So I just ask that we all treat each other the way we would want to be treated, that we are respectful of each other, whether we agree with each other or not. So also, I want to thank our security back here. We have a Woodland Park police officer. He is also the school resource officer. I want to thank him, Mr. DJ. And we also have our school security, Christine Cornell. Woo-hoo! So I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. I know we have a lot of interest. I want to thank Nate for being here this evening as well, representing the teachers. So tonight, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask our chairman, Seth Bryant, if he will explain the process that our District Accountability Committee went through. And before I forget, I want to thank the Sources of Strength class. Do we have Allie is here tonight? And I met with them this morning, and they were very polite and gracious to me. I had some bad news for them, but you know, you want to talk about a mature group of people that were so kind to me. I just really appreciated them. So I have a couple questions from them. If the questions aren't already asked tonight, I told them that I would ask their questions since they didn't have a chance to meet with Mr. Witt today. So I look forward to this evening. So Seth, why don't you tell us how the process worked for you and how you came to your questions with the DAC team?
Absolutely. Thank you, President Ruster-Holtz. My name is Seth Bryant. I'm the chairperson of the DAC. Over the past few weeks, the DAC has worked collecting feedback from all the different stakeholders in the community. We have DAC representatives who are teachers, administrators, parents, both in our charter and non-charter schools. We have community and business leaders and students on the DAC. All of the DAC members have been listening, taking feedback, taking questions from the community. We took all of that information we independently collected, brought it together at a work session. We broke into different stakeholder groups. We compiled our questions, and we presented them to the board. At no time did we really try and leave out any voice. The questions that were brought forward from the stakeholder groups are the questions that will be asked by the DAC tonight. Some were consolidated, taking two very similar questions and making it one more specific and succinct question. But outside of that, we have done our absolute level best to represent the feedback and the questions that the community has submitted to us. Once we finish our interview with Mr. Witt this evening, each individual DAC member will provide their feedback, and we will compile that and submit it to the board for their consideration. I would like to also say that the DAC would like to express its thanks for being involved in this process. We are partners with you in engaging the community and providing transparency to this process, and appreciate having a seat at this table.
Thank you. It's been very good working with you, and I've been very impressed with Seth's leadership and organizing things, how you're pulling this together. You're very good at it, and I really appreciate it. And I want to thank Jamie Dion for being the secretary of the group and compiling all these questions as well. Thank you, and thank you to the rest of you that are on it. So this evening we'll start out. I want to introduce our candidate, Mr. Ken Witt. Ken spent 10 years in education, he was the president of a school board and a school startup company. Most of his recent education work has been with re-envisioned BOCES. His early career centered on science and high tech, including running electronic engineering as vice president of a public company. He was in data analysis, software development for atmospheric propagation physics, and information security officer of 2 of Colorado's largest companies. So tonight I look forward to hearing answers to questions. This is quite a 2-hour interview, so I'm glad I'm not the one being asked the questions, Ken. So thank you, Ken, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So at this time, we'll hand the meeting over to Seth, and
Fantastic.
look forward.
Roll call.
We actually need to call the order and pledge allegiance.
I am so glad that I have people telling me what to do when I miss. So we will first, before we start our meeting, now that we've had all these introductions, let's call the meeting to order. As you know, tonight, normally Kelly Haven is the one who does the secretary work for the board, but unfortunately she slipped on the ice and is unable to be here tonight with us. So tonight our secretary is
Me.
Cassie Kimbrell. So, roll call.
Roll call. Illingworth.
Present.
Kimbrell. Here. Patterson. Here. Resterholtz.
Here. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Just for information tonight's meeting is being streamed and is available on the school's YouTube page. Is that, Lindsay, is that correct? All right. Now may I ask for a motion for approval of this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Illingworth.
Aye.
Kimbrell. Aye. Patterson. Aye. Resterholtz.
Aye. Now we will move on to the interim superintendent interview. And at this time, I'd like to hand the meeting over to Seth Bryant.
Thank you very much. We have been asked to direct our questions in 4 different categories. Strengths we find important for our next superintendent to possess, the level of education we expect the next superintendent to have, life experiences that we are looking for in our next superintendent, and the goals that we have for our next superintendent. As I mentioned, we developed these questions as part of different stakeholder groups, and representatives from each one of the stakeholder groups that submitted that question will be asking it of Mr. Witt. Our first question will come from the parents under the category of strengths you find important for the next superintendent to possess, and our DAC member, Aaron Hellstrom, will be asking it.
Good evening. Thank you for being here, Mr. Witt. My question for you is, if hired, what is your plan to increase staff retention and attract new teachers to the district?
I'm going to interrupt real quick, just so that the people who are watching at home and everyone in the audience can hear. If you could just, everybody talk into their microphone so that everyone.
Do you need me
has
to
an
repeat
opportunity.
that question?
I think I got it. Increase staff retention. What else?
And attract new teachers to the district.
Well, in my experience, people want to work where there's success, where there's a vision, where they feel like they're having an impact. One of the greatest ways to attract new talent is to be a place people want to work, to make people feel proud of what they're doing, to make people feel like that what they're doing matters, is valued, that the results are measured, and that they can show that they are doing an excellent job. I believe having a strong culture of success and recognition matters very much. But there's also an assumption in the question that I have to point out, and that is on the retention side. First, you have to determine if your retention is not high enough already. You said increase retention. I know you've had some teachers leave, but I don't know what the current retention situation is, and I'll have to evaluate that by listening and paying attention to who's here, why they're here.
Excuse me, there's feedback and I can't hear his response to us.
Yeah, the only way I could hear was through this.
Can we take the mic gain down on all the other mics not active? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Quite honestly, in any high-performing organization, 100% retention is never the goal. Retaining the great and the good, and recruiting great, and making certain that those that aren't performing find better careers is also part of the goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question to be asked is coming from our administration and teacher stakeholder group.
Yep, I'm going to ask that question because we don't have anybody in that group. But Ken, would you describe your philosophy on curriculum, instruction, and extracurricular activities? How would you implement that philosophy in Woodland Park School District?
Choices matter, and having a broad range of choices for students is critical to allowing them to find their place and their passion. So extracurricular activities feed into that just as much as curricular activities do. Having those opportunities to experience and to interact in environments that don't necessarily express themselves in the classroom is what makes the extracurricular activity selection a critical part of education. What is my philosophy on curriculum? Curriculum should be academically sound and strong. How do you implement it? By reviewing curriculum choices and making certain that you're making good ones, by listening to those who have background in that field and who recognize good curriculum from bad curriculum, and making excellent choices.
Thank you. The third question would be asked by Mr. Peckman from our charter stakeholder group.
Firstly, welcome, Mr. Witt, to our community. My question is, what specific skills or tools would you use to collect feedback from the community in a scientific, unbiased manner, and how will you maximize engagement with all members of our rural community?
There are a couple of pieces to that, so I'm going to try and break them out because I think there's several relevant elements in that question. Let's talk about reaching rural communities first. The organization I presently run oversees a significant student body, actually a larger student body than Woodland Park. We have programs, educational programs, full curriculum sets all over Colorado, including rural communities, including more isolated and smaller communities than Woodland Park. So I have direct, relevant, and significant experience in reaching rural communities with education solutions. On the point of scientific and unbiased, excellent question. People often don't like the answer, though, because there is no such thing as an unbiased survey. There are only unbiased polls. Statistical significance matters and random sampling matters if you actually want an unbiased result. So one of the things I have done in many organizations is shift from surveys to polls so that you can in fact get statistically unbiased feedback.
Thank you.
We're going to jump to our next category of questions here. the level of education you expect the next superintendent to have. Our charter community is going to ask both of these questions. Sean.
Okay, Mr. Witt, can you give one example from each of your diverse professional experiences that relates to a position as a leader of a school district?
One example from each, or one example from among all of them?
Each.
No.
One? How about among then?
Be happy to. My professional background is extremely diverse. I probably couldn't remember all of the roles I have had in various organizations, so it wouldn't be fair to claim that I can think of one from each. Sure, I think probably the most relevant experience I've had in running, that pertains to running a school district, is that I run one now. We have over 5,000 students, we have a handful of schools, we have a tremendous number of enrichment programs all over the state, and we innovate in creative ways. But if you want to go back to speak to the diverse piece as well, I used to have a company that helped schools start up, charter schools figure out how to pull together the information that they needed and design their educational programs. I think that's very relevant. I have historically been involved with school districts much larger than this, with much larger budgets, and so I understand the fiscal difficulties and challenges that go with running an educational organization as well. And then on the management side, in all fairness, I've run organizations that have personnel sizes this size and larger. I understand that to get the best out of people, you have to make them proud of what they do. You have to give them an opportunity to succeed, and you have to give them opportunities to excel and grow. And I think that's relevant to an educational enterprise such as this as well.
Thank you. Okay, looks like I'm up again, am I not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, still under the realm of level of education, so the question is level of education you expect the next superintendent to have, but this question falls under it, so I'll go ahead and get after it. How do you manage accountability for employers and committees in a fiducial manner?
Well, I'll answer the question directly. You asked fiducial. So that's important, right? Because governance has a direction. You elected a board that campaigned on specific promises and specific focus, and they set the tone. I serve at the will of that board, which means I have a fiduciary responsibility to your board. My employees have a fiduciary responsibility to me to execute the vision that we agree on and the strategy that we agree on. But we most critically have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers and the parents and the community to make certain that we're delivering an excellent education. Often in a question like that, people are thinking of financial fiduciary responsibility, so I will ask if that was the intent of the question.
It was not.
Okay, excellent. Was that responsive?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bryant, may I ask a follow-up question to the first one that he just asked? Please, would you mind? Mr. Witt, you had said that you now run a school with over 5,000 students in it, and that you operate with some very creative ways of educating kids. And would you mind describing briefly just one of those ways that you do that in the schools with maybe whether it's special needs kids or advanced accelerated learning?
Absolutely. And just to be accurate, the student count is around 5,000, but that's around, I think it is 4630 something, just to be accurate in the student count. Some of the most unique schools that we have are, we have a high-performance high school where many of the teachers are college professors, and that school has really knocked it out of the park. We have a special needs school which focuses on students suffering from dyslexia, dysgraphia, and other learning challenges of that ilk, where a significant percentage of the instructors are licensed language therapists. We look to authorize the types of schools that are needed, where there's a clear community desire for them, and that have exceptional models that deserve operation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next category of questions we're moving on to rotate around life experiences we are looking for in the next superintendent. I'll be asking a question on behalf of the parent stakeholders. What curriculum platforms do you have experience with? Do you have experience with a split curriculum platform environment where more than one platform is being used? And how about your experience implementing a new platform?
So, full disclosure, to be very specific with the question, no, I don't have experience with a split platform curriculum management system. I have, over the years, purchased many and selected many solutions, technical solutions for all kinds of business challenges, and that includes education. The first thing to know is that I'm not the best selector of everything, right? The people that are using it, who can explain the needs and the requirements, have to be part of that process. I may be the decision maker, but that doesn't mean I'm the selector. But having said that, we just went through an exercise of choosing a student information system, which I know what student information system you use here, but I found it a very educational, a very interesting exercise that we went through. We didn't pick the top two. We didn't pick from between the top two, as many school districts did. We looked at 5, we invited 3 in, and we chose 2 that were technological innovators at a much lower cost and a much higher feature set than the top 2 in the industry. So we're careful selectors as well.
Thank you.
Del, do you want to ask this one?
Mr. Garrick, I believe you have the next one on behalf of teachers and administration.
Great, thank you. Mr. Witt, can you describe a time you have led educational change that has led to positive results?
Absolutely. Let's start with Merit Academy. We authorized a school in a district where there was a significant parent community that wanted that solution, and you have a very happy group of families that are in that school. We've also worked very hard in finding the right solution, the right type of educational fit in many other communities, or I'll say in other communities. I don't want to overspeak, but there's a handful of them. All with significant positive results. Sometimes that's change. Sometimes it's in a place where those who thought they already had the solution didn't really want another one. But change is hard, and change is almost always worthwhile if you have a clear vision and a clear understanding of why it's going to be better. Change for change's sake is never the point. On an academic front, I guess I would answer the question on a slightly different scale. We've taken a look at a number of state policies and looked at what is required. And so an example would be, as we look at state requirements around educational models, sometimes we push back a little and say, you know, it would be better if online students had the same access to homeschool enrichment that brick and mortar students do. And push back on that policy and found a solution for it with the CDE. So I think it's a very positive change, but it did require some work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Pecron, I believe you have the last question in life experiences.
Okay, life experiences. Mr. Witt, what life experiences have led you to seek a profession in education, specifically this position?
There are many. We say life experiences, but I'll start with the easy answer, the one that's probably the most obvious, which is I have a passion for education. I love schools. I love study. I loved school experience as a child. I loved school and study as an adult, and I enjoy teaching. So it's I've done many things across my career, but education has been the most rewarding. So that's the easy answer. But I'll give you a little history as well. I did not have a typical early school experience. I was blessed to be an accelerated learner, and this was a long time ago. So they didn't exactly know what to do when I turned in all the homework on the first day of school or after the first weekend. And so they took a big teacher's desk and they turned it backwards against the back wall of the room. And for a couple of years, they just said, study and turn it in and we'll find someone to grade what you turn in. I didn't mind that at all. I loved it because that was my learning environment. But I think we can do better, right, at meeting a child's needs where it is and figuring out what's the best solution to allow every single child to realize their full potential, regardless of what educational supports they need.
Thank you.
All right, the final category of questions that we have are under goals that we have for our next superintendent. Casey, would you be willing to ask the next one on behalf of parents, please?
How will you bring families back to the district and increase retention?
That goes back, excuse me, it's water time, pardon me. That goes back a little bit to a previous question. People want to be where their needs are being met, where their expectations are being met. Bringing families back to Woodland Park, I want to be fair. I don't hold the view that there's some crisis that has made everyone leave Woodland Park. I don't believe that's the case. There are a number of issues to address. But it is certainly the case that you have had a higher enrollment than you do now, that we have an opportunity to create great programs to increase the visibility and the success of our schools so that we become a magnet for families in the area, not just in Woodland Park, but in the broader area. So I think focusing on excellent schools, excellent academic success will have that desired effect. You talk about retention, and this time I think you're talking about family retention, student retention. Families don't leave schools very easily. The truth is, if their needs are being met and their kids are getting the education they were expecting them to get, they're not leaving. So the answer to how to increase retention is the same as the answer of how to attract new families. And it is deliver the educational solutions that they're really looking for, that those families are looking for. And number one, they'll come. And number two, they'll stay.
Mr. Hellstrom, if you would please.
Sir, what strategies do you use to increase academic performance? Testing. What strategies do you use to increase academic performance, and how would you build on the current successes of our already established curriculum?
Well, the first step in building on current successes is listening and understanding what you have in place, why you have it in place, how it works well, and recognizing where there's opportunities for improvement. And then talking with the stakeholders, talking with parents, talking with teachers to find out where the levels of satisfaction are and the levels of delight in the current educational system, and where the challenges are and the levels of dissatisfaction are. In terms of implementing improving academic performance, there's a handful of ways to do that. And quite frankly, first you have to understand what's being done now before I can tell you what needs to be done to improve academic success. But I'll tell you some of the tools. One of the tools to improving academic success is actually focusing the education on academics. Sometimes that's needed. One of the ways to increase academic success is increasing the amount of supports that you have for students of various groups, accelerated learners, learners with specific learning challenges, making certain that you have the right supports in place for each of the communities that you can identify where you can make a difference there. And thirdly, and we spoke about this a little bit before, but another way that you improve academic success is choosing good curriculum.
You said choosing good curriculum? Thank
Yes.
you.
All right. Allie, our student is going to be asking the next two questions.
How would you improve harassment and bullying, specifically cyberbullying, and ensuring students have support and resources?
I guess there are several pieces to that. So let me try and hit each one. Cyberbullying. Number one, you will never keep kids from being able to be offensive when they choose to, right? If I can't put it on social media, I can write it down or I can yell it at you. So dealing with cyberbullying has two aspects to it. One is teaching kids how to cope. Two is protecting them from excessive abuse. And both of those have to be implemented. But the other piece also is teaching kids as part of the educational process personal resilience. That your self-image is not about how others perceive you, but it's about yourself, about how you perceive yourself. And teaching kids to have self-esteem and high self-esteem goes a long way. I'm certain that this district, as any, also has a Safe to Tell or similar system implemented. And making certain that students know about it, that it's rigorously implemented, can go a long way too, to give children a way to, and I shouldn't say children, students. We've got the whole age range here all the way up to adult, but giving students the confidence that where those issues exist, they know how to reach out and ask for help.
All right, the next question is, how do you plan to handle controversial subjects and curriculum?
I'm sorry, could you ask that one again?
How would you plan to handle controversial subjects and curriculum?
Well, in a word, with transparency. It's easy for educational enterprises to forget that they're not our kids. They're the parents' kids. Parents make choices on how they want their children reared, and we are not in a place to undermine them. So when there is something that is controversial, parents need to know about it. That's where the transparency comes in. We need to make certain that curriculum is available so that parents can understand what's being taught and respect their views on what's being taught.
Can I follow up real quick with that one, Allie? I mean, Ken, do you think is part of what we can get from that sort of transparency is that can increase parental engagement in the schools themselves if they not only know what's being taught, but then have a chance to offer their opinion on it and deal with the professionals here at the job?
And perhaps ask for alternatives.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to give parents a means, so actually creating and making certain you have a means for parents to understand what's being taught, to have feedback on controversial topics, and to give them an alternative if they don't like what's being taught and feel like it undermines their household teaching, then to allow them to ask for an alternative lesson.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Ellie? I know that speaking with some of the kids, some of the students, there is, as the students get older in the upper grades, they of course, like with my own kids, wanted to have more and more say in what they wanted to do and perhaps divergent from what the parents want. What kind of focus do you put on the upperclassmen and where students begin to that separation, or maybe not begin it, but really start walking out on their own and away from mom and dad's guidance? How would you deal with controversial subjects like 11th and 12th graders? Did I make that clear as mud, the question?
I think I'm tracking.
Okay.
Well, number one, high school certainly is a time of much broader experience and choices among experiences. And so kids are going to, at that point, they're not kids anymore, they're young adults or they're approaching adulthood, are going to want a broad selection of activities and opportunities. But nonetheless, there is a magic line here, and it's 18, at the point at which they are no longer subject to their parents' views entirely on education, and they can make their own choices. And prior to that, parents have a right to have some involvement in those choices.
All right, we have one more question in our standard set here. President Rusterholz, we did have a few additional questions if time allows. So after we get done with this one, will you please let us know if we can continue?
Oh, sure, we're just at 6:35.
Would you like us to continue? then?
Yeah, I would like you to
Yes.
continue. They're great questions.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
I think everyone agrees too.
okay. Yeah, like I said, does everybody agree? Mr. Pecron, you've got the next question.
Remaining under goals for the next superintendent, Mr. Witt, my question is, what skill set do you bring to ensure respect and acceptance to all schools and foster unity in the district?
Well, perhaps an interesting experience in that regard is I used to run information security where I had to set up controls. And by controls, we mean the rules by which you would conduct certain activities. And nobody liked them, right? Nobody likes being given a set of rules. So it's always difficult. To make matters worse, I ran a team that had a representative in each of 20 different countries on 5 continents. So there was a whole lot of cultural disagreement as well on what controls were appropriate and which ones were not. So I got a lot of experience in hearing everyone out, recognizing the differences that were genuinely related to the issue that we're trying to solve, and those that were actually more related to expectations and experiences of those groups, and to figure out what was a reasonable solution that met all of the expectations as closely as we could, but also to ensure that at the end we accomplished the goal. And that meant there's almost always someone out of 20 nations with their nose a little bit out of shape. I know how to work for consensus and how to hear the differences and work through them, but I also know how to get the end goal met, which means working through some resistance as well.
Thank you.
Casey, would you be able to answer the next one? We're going to circle back around to some strengths we find important for our next superintendent to have.
How do you respond to professional failure or public criticism?
Probably poorly. So the first part of that question is a little vague. Do you mean my professional failure, or do you mean professional failure of those that work with me? I'll answer both if you'd like.
I'm going to go rogue here and say your own professional failure.
Right. So we all have setbacks. We all wish we had done something differently. I am certainly no exception. I'm a fairly self-reflective person. I regularly do debriefs of projects that I have run. I regularly sit down with staff and say, okay, we just worked through this initiative. What did we not do so well so that we can do it better next time? What did we knock out of the park so we can replicate it next time? And sometimes projects just don't go the way you were expecting them to. Sometimes you encounter an obstacle that you didn't see coming, and it is a professional failure because you were supposed to have mapped it all out. But sometimes you just get surprised, and you have to be willing to ask yourself, was that my failure? Because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's, whoops, I didn't see that. I need to tell people, sorry, we missed that. We're going to figure it out. So being self-reflective, I think, is part of that, and being willing to work through the mistakes not try to hide them is also part of that.
Right. Mr. Garrick, we've got another question under life experiences we're looking for in the next superintendent in green. Would you be able to read that for us, please?
I will. Describe a time when you had a conflict with a colleague, and how did you resolve with a positive outcome?
Well, there's certainly a nice long list of those over the years. I would say probably one of the most interesting was there was a time in my career, I was an engineer and I did electronics design for many years and was VP of engineering, so ran the helm of product development in a public company. And one day a representative of the board of directors came in and said, "We need you to be marketing because you are the best communicator in this company about our products." And that was not really a welcome change for me, but I needed to deal with it. But they already had a VP of marketing. And rather than doing the right thing and replacing them, they said, "Go figure it out." So over 2 or 3 days, we literally went to loggerheads over what are your responsibilities going to be, what are my responsibilities going to be. They asked me in here because there's a problem to solve, so please don't say everything's fine. But it was extremely painful. There were a lot of hurt feelings for the first day and a half, and then after about a day of really honestly talking through the issues and what the problems were, we both left that company with deep mutual respect and a lot of collaboration on marketing enterprises.
Thank you. Mr. Bates, would you be able to read our next question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Witt, what is your approach to behavioral issues in schools?
There are a number of answers to that question, so I'm not going to take it too simply here. It depends on what the behavioral issue is. But the answer is there is a process, right? First off, is the behavior something that you can't reconcile in the classroom, or is it something that a teacher should be equipped to deal with? Making certain that we have our teachers properly trained and properly functional in classroom management is very important. However, sometimes it needs to leave the classroom. Sometimes it goes beyond that. And making certain that our schools have the right process in place to handle to recognize the source of the behavior issues and to bring in the right resources to help deal with it, because sometimes it's not just the school. And ultimately, make certain that we're also protecting everyone in the process. Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch right back to goals we have for the next superintendent. I'll be asking this question, and then Mr. Bates, will you finish us up with the last of our questions from the DAC?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Witt, how will you advocate for district staff at the state level?
Well, to be perfectly clear, my number one priority will be advocating for students at the state level. It's easy to forget that our real goal here is educating our students. But the secondary goal is to advocate for staff and to make certain that we have the right educational resources, the right educational understanding, and a voice in the decisions that are being made for school districts and the impositions that are being placed on us with unfunded mandates and changes in direction that are constantly going on. But thirdly, I hear all the time from teachers and from principals and from administrators that, look at what the state board has done now, or look at what the CDE has done now. They've added this thing or whatever. Part of advocating is pushing back on bad ideas too, and having a strong enough voice to be heard.
Seth, could I ask a follow-up?
Please.
Mr. Witt, can you give, you're talking about advocating for students and teachers at the, at the state level and at the State Board of Education. What experience do you have advocating with the State Board of Education now, and what, if you have, how has that looked? What does that look like?
Well, we interact from time to time. It's easy to forget about parents' rights in education, and I find that some of the dialogue of late has been around that. But I guess I will underscore one. The State Board has asked on more than one occasion, what are we doing about state assessment participation rates? Online schools, and we run a number of them, have very low state assessment participation rates. These parents have chosen online education because they didn't want their kids in a bricks and mortar school for whatever reason. They're often distant from the nearest school, and sometimes they're simply not willing to take their kids to a school. And that means they're not willing to take them in for assessments. So the participation rate is lower. It's not terrible depending on the school, but it's often quite a bit lower. But the state sets thresholds, of course, for that participation rate. So when the State Board has asked me, what are you doing about state assessment participation rates? My response has been honoring the Colorado statute that says parents have a right to opt their children out of state assessments. Because sometimes it's easy to forget who the real stakeholders are.
May I ask a follow-up to the follow-up? Please. One of the accusations against you has been the low test scores that your schools rate. And some at our last week's meeting had said that our school district's scores are much higher than some of the schools that you currently oversee. You had said about the online schools that kids don't take those assessments. And as I recall, Tina and Dell have often said that there's a real push to get the kids to take those because it helps with our assessment. Can you explain about why, perhaps, is this one of the reasons why your schools, some of their rates are low? Is that correct? Is it not correct? So.
Sure. We have just an extreme range of schools in our portfolio, as you can imagine, schools and programs. Online schools struggle with assessment participation rates, which means, so last year all of our schools were either in performance or improvement. This year we had a school that was marked down for participation rates because it was below 90%. Historically, we've been able to provide other measures of academic success. It's called a request to reconsider, and the CDE would evaluate those and say, oh, you're right, they're doing fine, it's just they didn't take the assessment. This year they did not allow us to do that, so we got a school marked down significantly for low participation rates, which we will be contesting. However, I heard one of the questions at the recent board meeting about SAT averages and a statement that our SAT averages were low. And they were comparing it to your brick and mortar high school here. And so I would just point out that we have a brick and mortar high school as well. Our brick and mortar high school has an average SAT score of 1149, and it has a graduation rate of 100%. So we don't apologize for the performance of our schools, but there are different schools. We have an alternative education campus, which has very challenged population and has difficult scores. We have a full online school that, again, struggles with assessment, but has remained in performance or improvement. So it does vary by the student population. We have a school for dyslexic students. As you can imagine, we have therapists involved there, but scores are going to be somewhat low there as well. We try to meet those students where their needs are and give them the best education we can and bring them up. What we don't do is run away from a student population or try and hide it, because it's going to make our scores go down, because students come first.
Thank you.
The final question, Mr. Witt, the final written question. What action plan do you have to ensure the district is financially prudent and transparent with the taxpayers?
I'm thinking for a moment because there's an implication there with action plan. There's an implication that perhaps that's not the case now, and I'm not going to concede that because I don't know that. I think the right behaviors to make certain that we are fiscally responsible, I have a significant amount of skill at. Number one, taking a hard look at how and where you're spending and why. Is it actually part of the priority? Focusing the capital, focusing the resources on the product, in this case, education, is significant. It's easy to get distracted with a lot of things that don't actually apply. So bringing some discipline into an organization to pay attention that the spend is going towards the desired outcome often significantly improves the finances. But having said that, again, I don't know that there's a problem. What I do know is that there's always a problem if you're not paying attention to it.
Thank you.
That concludes the DAC's questions that we have prepared.
Thank you very much. I thought those were very good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now it is the Board of Directors' opportunity to ask some questions. And so,
Can I ask you, David, since the DAC is done, if we want to take maybe a 5-minute recess, if anybody needs to take a break, or if anybody doesn't want to sit up here under the lights, now that their questioning is done, it might be a good time to take a quick break.
all right, well, why don't we do that? Let's take a 10-minute, is 10 minutes enough? 10-minute break? All right, we'll see you at 7 o'clock. All right, everybody. I am.
The lady was saying we got to make sure. When we ask a question, talking in the microphone.
Okay, one thing that I was reminded of is to make sure that we're talking into the microphones for the people who are clapping. So sorry about that. And also for the people who are watching online. So yes, Sue reminded me once, but of course. And thank you for this thing. All right, so now the next part will go on to the Board of Directors asking some questions. So let's start out with, well, who would like to start? Okay, Sue.
Okay.
Now make sure you use the microphone.
Okay, Mr. Witt, our district is a part of the UPass BOCES for Special Education Services, along with Manitou Springs District, Cripple Creek and Victor District, and Merritt Academy. How would you further a positive working relationship within the UPass BOCES for students with EIPs?
I believe it's Pikes Peak BOCES, or at least on my tour today, that's what they told me. So if I'm wrong, one of the two is, but either BOCES, whichever one it is, the answer is it's a strong working relationship here. It has to be. That is your provision of many special education expertise, of much special education expertise, and working with the BOCES to make certain that we have the right resource allocation is critical, and we will certainly continue to do that. I do run a BOCES now, but our BOCES doesn't focus on special education, but that does mean I do have some insight into the BOCES mechanics, if you will.
Thank you.
Cassie.
Okay.
Cassie.
What, from your previous experiences, which I know you have many of them, so if you could choose one of your most challenging situations and how you were able to overcome some of those challenges.
Well, I won't reuse the Vice President of Marketing story, although I believe it would directly apply.
I thought about that as well, but I figured that you have many experiences and that you could think of something else to share with the
No worries.
audience. Thank you.
No worries. Well, okay, sure. I'm not sure that this helps you as much as you would like, but it's probably one of the most challenging situations I ever found myself in. I was hired by an electronics company to do voice encoding when the industry was new. It was truly new. There were only a handful of people in the world who did the vocoding software. So this company called me and asked me to come interview with them, which I did. And they asked me, so what do you know about digital signal processing? And I told them nothing. And they took a long pause and said, so why are you here? And I said, because you called me. Why did you call? They said, because we're told you're incredible at this particular field of mathematics. And I said, well, that's probably an overstatement, but the truth is, I can be an expert in digital signal processing if that's what you're looking for, and I am very interested. That's why they told you to call me. So they said, well, this is an interesting interview. So you have, we'll put you on probation. We're going to hire you just because this is really interesting. You have 2 weeks. And so I had 2 weeks to learn this field thoroughly enough to actually get in there and go at it. I seriously considered whether or not I had made a mistake, right? And so it was a huge challenge because it was not a trivial undertaking. But for 2 weeks, all I did was read and study and work problems and figure it out. And when I showed up, I met the challenge. But it was a completely new enterprise for me. So it was a huge obstacle, but quite honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Mr. Illingworth.
Mr. Witt, how do you see the role of the superintendent working with a school board of directors in a way that furthers that relationship in a positive direction, such that the board is able to best assist the superintendent perform his or her duties, and the superintendent is able to help the board perform their duties?
I think there are several elements to that. Having been in a couple of relationships, board to superintendent type relationships over the years, I guess there are three elements. The first element is to remember that the superintendent serves at the will of the board. So that means I have to understand what the board's vision is as a unit, and we have to work towards those goals and actually get there. But the second element is boards can't make good decisions, and there are many to make without good information. So developing not just a transparency, but an experienced, relevant information exchange is critical to being able to do that. And then I would say thirdly, and I think this is fundamental, avoiding the tendency that anyone has when they're running an organization to be defensive about choices, right? Good choice making means offering alternatives and explaining why the best alternative, why you believe what the best alternative is, but being willing to listen when the goals aren't quite aligned and hearing the differences in the voices.
Thank you. Mr. Witt, I have a question here. My first question is from our students in the Sources of Strength class, and some of them are sitting right down here tonight. Glad to see you here. First question is, in your application letter you said, I'm committed to ensuring Woodland Park families had great educational choices. What specifically will you do to ensure this?
So specifically, we'll look at what extracurricular activities we have, what school lines, pathways, I guess is what you normally call them, what school pathways we have, CTE choices, career and technical education choices, college-bound choices, interactions with local universities, concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment, as well as AP, but to make certain that we have a very broad range of choices for education, to make certain that the path you were hoping would get you to the career you're looking for actually exists for you as much as possible.
Thank you. Oh, Sue's asking me to ask the next one. Question number 2 from the class. Sorry. During your time with other schools, how did you communicate with students in a way that was productive to their learning success? And how did you go about gathering and considering their input in a way that was healthy for especially the students, that they would feel that it was a healthy way of communicating?
It's really important to understand that the superintendent doesn't run the individual schools. We make larger scale decisions, but a strong school has a strong leader and has a communication pipeline that makes certain that student voices can be heard up. It would be a mistake for me to try and talk to every student in Woodland Park and then try to decide what every principal should be doing. And I won't make that mistake. But having said that, to ensure that we have good student groups and that you have a chance to have your voices heard and to find themes and concerns and particularly gaps where you believe things are missing is very important. And the ways we do that are we ask for parent surveys and the results of parent surveys and family surveys. We ask for student surveys from our schools. And depending on the nature of the school, those activities can look differently.
I have one more here that Sue's urging me to ask. So students want to feel valued in terms of their voice. And there was there were some things that have been brought up about, you had addressed bullying before. So is there, and another thing that they want to know is, how will they feel valued and not bullied by your approach or style of leadership?
Well, at one level, we choose how we feel. Someone doesn't choose it for us. So personal responsibility comes into play when you're trying to understand someone else. I believe in listening and seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. So a healthy dialogue is listening first. Students are valued. All I can do is make certain that they understand that the whole enterprise here is to make certain that you have great opportunities and great pathways into your adult life. And the only way to do that is to focus on making certain that you're bringing the best array of choices and making certain that students know that you're listening and you're trying to hear what choices they're seeking.
You did not value the students today.
Wait, excuse me. All right, can you, could you please take care of this, please?
That was not the question that was given to you. Answer our question.
I asked your questions in the most polite way that I could.
That wasn't the question that was given to you.
That's enough. Perhaps there will be time, perhaps, for you to ask that question, but not tonight and not in the way that was written. I put it in a very respectful way.
It was as respectful as possible.
Thank you.
Ken, you said you were talking earlier about surveys versus polls, and I just heard you mention using surveys again. So can you explain a little bit about the challenges you have seen with surveys and how they can possibly, I guess you've found difficulty in your experience to do it in a completely unbiased way. What do you mean when you say surveys versus polls, and why one over the other?
Absolutely, happy to elaborate on that. I don't want to get too technical, and I didn't mean to make it too technical, but the point is, anytime you invite a population, any subpopulation in a group, to voluntarily respond to something, you get a highly biased response, because those that are most motivated to evoke response by their group will have a louder voice and will have a disproportionate weight in that survey. So surveys, open invitation surveys are always highly biased. They're never unbiased. Scientifically, when you do any kind of experiment where you actually want to get to the factual answer, you poll, you sample, and not just sample, you randomly sample. So when Gallup poll tries to get an answer about elections or something like that, they don't invite people to call in and express their views of who they want to vote. They randomly sample from the population that they're trying to understand. There's a 95% confidence interval achieved by 30 individual random samples in a population, if you have a mathematics background, but they have to be random. So that's the difference between polling and surveying. Surveying, you ask people to respond. A poll, you reach out and ask individuals to respond in a randomly sampled manner. You can't always do that, but when you want it to be unbiased, you have to do that.
Thank you.
All right, I have a question. What is your experience with getting parents engaged and involved if they aren't today?
There's, I guess, a couple of directions there. I'll try to handle both of them. Number one, you can't force anyone to do anything. So you will always have a parent community, a subset, that are not going to be engaged. However, you can greatly increase the engagement level by reaching out instead of just asking them to reach out, by meeting them where you can, by creating communication channels that meet them where they are as much as possible. But nonetheless, you have to deal with the fact that you can improve engagement. It'll never be perfect, and you still have to make decisions.
Thank you.
Mr. Witt, our schools are currently around 50% capacity, the enrollment. Do you see that as our glass half empty or half full?
It's absolutely a glass half full. It creates lots of opportunity to do new and creative things. And back to the listening first, have to look at the situation, have to look at where the commonalities are, where the shared resources might exist, where they don't, where unique resources are required, and spend some time listening to the opportunities. But it certainly creates opportunity to do new things. And in my experience, real improvement, real progress only occurs when you try some new things.
Thank you.
Mr. Witt, your background is engineering, right?
True.
And I understand that you've also worked in cybersecurity?
For an extended period, a fairly extensive period, yes.
So what led you to get involved in school district administration in the first place?
I've always naturally been a teacher. I've never professionally been a teacher, but I've had some very interesting experiences throughout my life. I tutor constantly. I've always tutored constantly. And quite honestly, even from a very young age, teaching was something that I cared a lot about. I actually taught my high school calculus class when the teacher turned up ill for a month because the school concluded I was the best qualified to do so. It was an interesting time as a youth. I used to tutor graduate mathematics as an undergraduate. Just cared a whole lot about teaching, as it was a passion of mine. So the passion has always been there. The truth is, I like information, I like science and technology particularly, and found myself going down that path and then feeling a little unfulfilled as I realized that I wasn't having an impact on lives, on the future, if you will, on the future generation, and found a lot more fulfillment as I began to get involved with education.
All right, this is a question that's been asked to me a lot of times, so I wanted to go ahead and ask it tonight. If we hire you for our new interim superintendent, what will be the first thing you would do?
Listen, go around, speak with each school administrator, speak with the administrative staff at the administrative offices, take a look at how we're doing, listen to the whys of the choices that have been made, and the whats of what do you wish we could have done differently, we could do differently, what have you already tried and it didn't work out. You start by listening, and then you begin to formulate plans.
Thank you.
Sue. Mr. Witt, one of the questions that I've been asked by different groups is there is a concern, I'll just lay it down first before the question. There's a concern that on your resume you have not listed any classroom experience. Teachers want to know that they are both seen and heard, and they want to know that they matter. So what support will you give to our teachers? What will that look like, and how will you meet those needs of the teachers?
Well, excuse me. I guess the first part of that is, no, I haven't been a teacher in a K-12 classroom other than in a couple of unusual circumstances. But as a business leader, you're not the lawyer, you're not the CPA, you're not many of the things that you still have to get done. You don't design the widgets, you don't build the product. In education, you don't get to be the teacher at some point. You don't get to be the principals. You don't get to be the counselors. but you still have to understand those roles and the importance of what's going on there and the supports that they need to succeed. You can't run an organization without understanding what it takes to succeed in each of those capacities. The number one mission of education is teaching students. And so the number one focus has to be on what do teachers tell you it takes to succeed. And that's exactly what we'll try to understand.
Thank you.
I don't have anything further.
Cassie?
Does Sue have anything else? Dave?
I don't have anything.
You go.
Okay. You've answered a couple of the questions about bringing family back to the district, about that creating opportunities that we would be, because of the opportunities, you said that we would draw them back, as a magnet would draw people back to our community. Can you give some specifics, if you can, as much as you know Woodland Park School District, how would you go about delivering those educational opportunities that those families are looking for? Both our current and perhaps what will you do to draw people up the hill?
Well, I guess there are a couple of elements that are almost certainly appropriate, although, again, you've got to figure out first what's there before you start talking about what's needed. And I'll be careful there because, again, you start by listening, not by thinking you know what the answers are. But having said that, there are some common themes. One is differentiation. Parents want to find the right fit for their child. No two children are the same. As a father of 4, I went through a year where I had 3 children in high school and not one of them in the same high school, because each one needed a different learning environment. One went to a medical careers high school that was a magnet school that would have just killed one of my other kids. The other one went to a neighborhood school where they knew everyone, they were socially comfortable there and got a good education. Another one went to a Christian school because that's where they wanted to be. Parents need to be able to find the best fit for their child. And that means all schools can't be cookie cutter. They can't all look just the same. There need to be good choices, good program choices, good technology pathways, good career and technical pathways, choices among them so that parents can make good choices for every child, for each child, not for all children at once.
Anyone else?
To follow up from your question, President Ruster-Holtz, another question I received from the community was, what do you think the value is of extracurricular programs in the school district?
I think they're very valuable. I belonged to the Spanish club and the chess club and the math club when I was in high school. I'm sure everyone here hopefully had some opportunity to do something extracurricular. And quite honestly, it is central to giving students, particularly students that are beginning to think about what life looks like after high school, giving them opportunity to get involved in things that they think they care about so they can discover whether or not it's really their passion. Classrooms do not give you enough of that. There have to be other exposures, and I think public school can help with that.
Thank you. Sue? Steve? I have another one. Here's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for me as well because I have not experienced anything like this before either. Our school community and our community have a real rift in it right now. There's a lot of division, both in our class, in our schools. There's a lot of fear from teachers, from students. And I think that with our board of directors, it has really brought it to the surface and revealed this division. I hate division. I love unity. even if we disagree, like this morning, meeting with the students, a very respectful group, we disagree, but boy, do I like these kids. They are good kids, they're smart kids, they're motivated. Do you have any ideas of how, going forward, we can work to bring this community, this school community that we have, back together?
Yes. I think the number one way of creating unity is creating some clarity. What causes a lot of friction is fear. People are afraid of what the outcome might be. They're afraid of how things might go. They don't think that their particular interest is going to be served, but someone else's is, right? Those are the two kinds of divisive forces. Well, you can't change the fact that we need to do our best for students because that's our mission. That means having excellent programs. That means looking at where improvements can be made. That means focusing on not just making everyone happy with the way things are, but asking how they might be better. And change is hard, and change brings friction. But if you sit down and communicate thoroughly, if you make people understand by giving them an opportunity to hear the reasoning of where you're going and why you're going there, and what improvements can be made, and why you believe those improvements require these changes, then you have the best chance of having a confidence level, the best confidence level you're going to get in where you're headed. You will never have complete unity. You're never going to have no one complaining. But you can certainly make huge strides by trying to be as transparent as possible in what you're doing.
Thank you. Sue or anyone else? Well, I have at least two more.
You go ahead.
Okay. Currently, approximately 38 to 40% of our students go on to higher education, to college. And we have a wonderful college program that kids are currently involved in here. It's just a partnership with the local college. We have a lot of kids who don't ever take that career pathway. Here at the school, we have a wonderful welding program that is very, very popular. We did have a culinary program that we need to fill with leadership in it. So my question to you is, a lot of parents and students, parents want their kids to be able to have those opportunities that are outside of higher education. Students are really desirous of that. Tell me some examples of how you would like to move forward with what the parents and the kids want in regard to this.
Well, I do believe strongly in the career and technical education pathways, those pathways that aren't necessarily college-bound students. And I'll underscore that while not every student is college-bound, in fact, over half of them these days are not college-bound or don't think they are, you've got to be carefully listening all the way through the process and giving them a chance to both make the path choice that they think is right, but also to make certain that they have a chance to consider all the way along the path whether or not maybe they want to change. So you've got to be careful and flexible there, that you're not locking students into choices that in the end they wish they hadn't gone down. So some flexibility is really important in this. But having said that, career and technical education, I did have an opportunity to tour your high school today and see some of those facilities and your middle school. And you've got some great things. You've got 3D printing and manufacturing processes going on. I saw your culinary arts facility. I'll be delighted to meet a culinary arts teacher as soon as we find one. I saw your welding facility as well. I had an opportunity 6 weeks ago, maybe 7, but right around there, to tour one of the premier CTE facilities in the South. It was funded largely by the Daniels Fund here, but not in this state. It was funded down in New Mexico. and it was a truly remarkable place. They had much of what you have here. They had a significant number of manufacturing and crafting facilities. They had robotics. They had a number of significant undertakings. And they had a unique model of involving part-time teachers who were from industry, who were in the community actually doing the jobs and working 1 or 2 days a week at the school as well, and finding those partnerships. Because if you just try and employ those teachers, then you can't afford enough of them to have enough pathways for kids to choose between. But if you can come up with community partnerships, you can have more pathways. And so I think there's some opportunity there.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, one of my last concerns is, and I'm just going to reiterate it, just something that is more of a statement from me, is that we really want to create an atmosphere or a school or a curriculum that brings people back. But we have a multiple needs here. I mean, of course, increasing our school performance, creating a wonderful program for the students of diverse directions that they all want to go. My biggest concern, and I know you've already addressed this, is what do we all do? I know it's not all on you, it's not on the school board. As a huge school WPSD family, how do we bring, and I ask all of us out here, how do we bring this fractured family back together? We have so many different ideas. I know we've talked about some different things too last Wednesday, and I appreciate what you had to say, Jacob. It was very good. So we all need to work together to bring this fracture back. And I just want to say to you, to me and to many people here, that's something we really need to work towards. And what you said before is fear. How do we overcome that fear? But anyway, thank you very much. From me, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and interview with us. Is there any closing statement that any of the other directors would like to make?
I just want to say thank you to the DAC and for being here as well. Thank you to Ken Witt for coming for this interview, and thank you for the audience. I really appreciated your answers for surveys and polls. I thought it was really interesting because there was a survey that went out where we surveyed the parents. And I'm sitting up here and I'm a parent and I did not get interviewed. And I wondered how many other parents in our community that feel like me that did not get interviewed for our district. And so I really appreciate your answer tonight for that. Thank you.
And just on a personal note, thank you all so much. I know this is a huge investment of time. It is certainly worth it. But I deeply respect and admire and appreciate the way the school district has shown me around and introduced me, given me great input and thoughts, and a very thoughtful and thorough interview process, and I appreciate it.
I want to thank you for coming to speak with the community tonight, Mr. Witt. I'll say as a parent who has 4 children attending schools in the district, I understand very strongly what you went through in terms of talking about your kids going to different schools and addressing each child's need. That's something that every parent is going to recognize. And I hope that if you do end up joining the district, you'll continue to keep our kids first and keep their parents in mind in terms of making sure that parents stay involved in the education of their children and consequently involved in the governance of their school district and making sure that a public school district truly represents the public. So I hope that you always keep that in mind if you're so fortunate to join us up here in beautiful Woodland Park and our surrounding communities. I want to thank the DAC. Really, they can't be thanked enough. Mr. Bryant and the entire team here. Not everybody could make it tonight, but when we decided to do this, it was not the process that had been done before. There had been various different committees, and nobody was ever all together all at once. And it couldn't be truly public that way. And that was the challenge we put out to the DAC right after you guys came on board. And I have to say, I was there for the DAC when they were working together in their groups to form their questions, and they worked diligently. And the end result was something that we could only have hoped for when the DAC came together, which was to truly get diverse viewpoints, to get true community representation. Everybody on the DAC is a member of our community, is a parent in school or an employee in the school district, including representation from our charter school for the first time. And I think you guys did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for your commitment, your time, and your absolute dedication to serving the people of this community.
Thank you very much. I know myself, and I'll speak on behalf of the rest of the DAC, that we feel privileged to be involved in this. We know it's a non-traditional kind of role for the DAC, but we do appreciate the opportunity to help bring the community's voices forward for your consideration.
You did that. You did that. You did.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to thank the DAC as well. They put a lot of work and heartfelt questions to be asked. And Mr. Witt, I thank you for coming up here. And I just ask the community, to keep an open mind that we have to make the decision if our glass is half empty or half full. And we have a whole open whiteboard to build on what we're doing well and what we can do better, but we have to come together, as Mr. Rusterholt said, about working as a community in the best interest for the students and the parents, because the parents are ultimately responsible for a child's education, and we all need to realize that. And so I look forward to a fruitful and prosperous future.
And real quick, I really want to just say thank you to the other DAC members over here, especially Allie, for representing our student body, so thank you.
All right. Well, since we've thanked everybody who needs to be thanked, and let me thank the DAC too. So, thank you everyone for being here. And is there anything else someone would like to say? Chairman Bryant, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I guess I'll just finish up by reiterating the process the DAC is going to go through now.
Yes.
Each individual DAC member will send their feedback, their recommendations to me. I will compile them and give them to the board for their consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
One more time.
Second.
Roll call.
Illingworth?
Aye.
Kimbrell? Aye. Patterson?
Aye.
Rusterholtz?
Aye. Thank you again for being here tonight.